Hey Max, thank you so much for jumping on this call. Maybe we'll just kick starting with like give us like a quick intro yourself, your experience, and so on and so forth.
Sure. More than happy to, and thank you very much for having me on. My name is Max. I'm originally from Europe. Grew up in a small little town on the German-French border. Sort of had a very long-winded way into the world of venture. Initially, sort of started in research, worked at Google for a number of years, and then really fell into this world. Initially, did venture out of Europe for 4 or 5 years, and for the past 3 years have moved to the US and joined a firm called General Catalyst, where I lead a lot of the enterprise investing, especially here on the East Coast. So great to be here, and I have the great pleasure of also working with you guys.
Yeah. And as a disclaimer, you're one of our investors, so we're super happy with you and the firm, obviously. Um, the things that I wanted to talk to you about is a little bit from kind of the VC investors strategy point of view. And one of the things that we're always trying to understand if this whole wave of Gen AI is it more of like a new type of technology, or is it more of like an advancement? And I'm asking it if from your perspective, obviously.
Yeah. Um, I'd say I'm obviously biased as a venture capitalist. You have to be chronically optimistic about the future.
Yeah,
Uh, but that's being said, I think it's probably the most profound technological change that I've personally lived through, and it was very telling. I think a lot of developers noticed as soon as GPT-3 came out through API, the rest of the world realized the immense power when ChatGPT got released. But I think what was sure is that that Q4, every board in the world, whether you're a publicly traded trash company or whether you're Intel,
yeah,
discussed AI. And I think if I zoom out, if I'm a little cynical about the industry I'm personally in, we funded a lot of amazing businesses over the last 15, 20 years, but a lot of them haven't fundamentally changed the world. And I do believe that AI does have the opportunity to be as important as the literacy movement was, as the invention of the airplane was, as the printing press was. If you think about it, if you can give anyone in the world who has access to the internet Harvard level education, customized to the way they best learn in their local language. I think what that's going to do to humanity is going to be very, very profound. And there's so many illnesses that don't have the right treatment. Just giving everyone a mental health coach and a best friend and a buddy and a motivator, and drip feeding knowledge exactly the way you need it, I think is going to be some of the most exciting things that I'm foreseeing with AI. Equally, I'd say I think we're still in the very, very, very early innings of it, right? If you think about transformers as even an architecture, they've done so much, and they're probably the most profound thing that's happened in AI, and they've really ushered in this new excitement and era. But I think they're not going to get us all the way to AGI.
yeah,
If you think about how we currently design AI systems, we're still in this alchemy phase. You know, the, if anyone were to design a semiconductor or is designing a semiconductor, they pretty much simulate and emulate exactly what it's going to do and how it's going to perform across every parameter before you start building them. In the AI world, we just know that if you throw more compute and more data at it, it will eventually get better. But it's very crude, and before you do all of this, you don't really know what its reasoning capabilities will be, how good it will be in math, how good it
yeah,
will be breaking down problems, etc. And in part, that's why AI talent is so expensive right now, because you're paying for someone's empirical experience with pre-training, post-training, how to build data pipelines, how to ensure that data quality is really, really good. Because we don't have a formal mathematical understanding yet of input to output, and at the same time, transformers are somewhat limited. Backpropagation is incredibly expensive, so as we get bigger and bigger models, it'll become more and more expensive. Verification is really hard, so these are not deterministic systems. It's really hard to build guardrails to reliably get the same result. and they're just very poor at reasoning. So I think what we currently have is incredibly powerful pattern matching machines, but very little intelligence.
Yeah. And I think what's so amazing is that some of the stuff that we see out there, including the stuff that we do ourselves at Jigsaw, is like I used to think about it as like science fiction. Like I thought, and I used to give a lot of talks and lectures in different places. And I always said that things like that will happen in like 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Just to have it now makes you understand that, you know, in 5 years, in 10 years, we have no idea where we're going to be. And that's pretty amazing. And I think that maybe that's kind of the a good conduit to my next question. And as this becomes such a
Maybe
big
before we
thing,
go
yeah,
there,
yeah,
one more thing to build on. I think you've mentioned such a good point, which is I think our intuition in this space is so incredibly poor.
yeah,
Um, 3, 4, 5 years ago, or actually like maybe starting with the Transformer paper, when a Transformer paper got submitted to the best AI conferences in the world, it wasn't even selected as one of the best papers, which
oh
goes to
wow,
show
you
that
know, that's amazing.
even in the presence of, you know, brilliance, sort of the godfathers of the day couldn't really grasp yet how profound this would be. You know, similarly, we would have probably said that the first domains that are going to fall are sort of the white collar jobs, and the creative domain is gonna fall last. But
Yeah,
if you look at,
exactly.
you know, what actually ended up happening with Midjourney and the entire progress across the field, I think it's actually artists and creatives that are sort of threatened the most early on. And I think our intuition just generally about this space is so incredibly poor. And, you know, like 5, 6 years ago, we've told every truck driver to get a new job.
Yeah,
And now one of the best paid jobs in the US is to become a truck driver. And, you know, we're probably still 5, 10 years away. And so there's various elements where you can't fully predict it. And I think we're just going to be cautious.
yeah, that's totally amazing. And I think that one of the when we kind of prepared to our talk, we were very intrigued in your point of view, mostly because you were born and raised in Europe, and also had a lot of experience there business-wise. Like, what's the difference between how different countries look at AI? Because if this is not just a technology, so governments now needs to step in. It's not like cloud infrastructure, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's such a good point, and obviously, so much is culturally ingrained, right? I remember when I used to work at Google, that was nothing I could ever bring up. You know, when we had a family gathering in Germany, that was a just outright evil company. When in
Yeah,
America, that was the coolest, hottest company you could have worked for, and so there's
yeah,
definitely a lot in that. And you know, I think if you start with the U.S. maybe or North America overall, they've always emphasized supporting innovation and growth. They've had a lot of capital investment. They have obviously the deepest pockets in the venture ecosystem, but also you had the big tech companies playing an enormous role through Google, through Amazon, through Microsoft. If you just zoom out and you look at the majority of venture funding last year in the sector, it's really these hyperscalers that made this happen, right? And
yeah,
it's almost hard for us as venture capitalists because, you know, they have different motives. You know, a lot of the money that they give out comes back to them, and so it's almost distorted the ecosystem. But obviously, you know, the U.S. has done incredibly well from a talent perspective, from a capital perspective, and I think if you look at the regulatory side of things, they've really taken this light touch approach. You know, being a little bit more or less fair. It's typically state level esque. They more so wait for an incident and then they regulate.
yeah,
And I think overall, the industry and the government has decided to avoid sort of this heavy-handed regulation that would stifle innovation. Because I think there is a big recognition that part of what had made the U.S. so dominant in the startup world is, you know, not to overregulate. Then you look at, I don't know, countries like China. You know, a lot of the talent and the money really comes from the government.
yeah,
Um, and I think there, you know, there's a clear goal to actually also become an AI leader, and that's been already stated by 2030. So you've seen massive investment from the Chinese government into AI research, but I think, you know, and this is also in collaboration with obviously the likes of Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, and the giants there. But I think it's mostly characterized or somewhat overshadowed by the Western world in their perception around concerns around surveillance, social governance, you
Yeah.
know, which, in the Western's minds, is oftentimes sort of covered with concerns around privacy and human rights.
Yeah.
Then you look at the European Union, which, I sort of gave you this anecdote. You know, uh, it's they're always at the forefront of regulating first, right? And I think in many ways, from a global scale, you need someone to sort of push this forth. I'm maybe personally not the biggest friend of over-regulating too early on, and there's an intrinsic challenge of writing text that's supposed to govern an algorithm, a model, a non-deterministic system. I think if you look at GDPR, that's worked only to some extent. You know, no company is ever 100% GDPR compliant.
Yeah.
They're always somewhere in a grayscale, and it's
Yeah.
mostly being far enough to the right where you're not getting in trouble. But they've obviously done a good job, pushing out this EU AI Act to govern around privacy, data protection, and ethical standards. I think it's a good first framework. It's a good piece that the rest of the world can look at. But I think in isolation, it's tricky because in reality, outside of London, Europe wasn't traditionally an AI hub, right? In London, you have DeepMind, you have Google, you have a lot of amazing talent, but I think it'd be more relevant for a country like China or a country like the US to take a clear stance here, which hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Um,
And it seems to me like at a certain point, somebody will have to step in, whether it's going to be like a clear regulation or something that has to do with protection of workers and so on. Like I don't know, even if there are like classic unions, if you're like a web designer or creative designer and things like that. But for sure, that's going to become super interesting real quick. And
the,
wait, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
the last comment I'd make is, what's fundamentally changed so much in this AI era is that the half-life of technologies has become so short. What we think is mind-blowingly crazy is going to be commoditized in 6 months' time. And I think we've always, appreciated the notion that governments are slow, but I think we'll be in this perpetual state of them playing catch up, and it's
Yeah.
just hard to regulate a space that's moving at that pace, which, quite frankly, we've never seen anywhere on Earth.
Yeah, totally. And how do you view, in a different type of danger, maybe more of a business danger, how do you view all the different lawsuits that came about? Like there was a lawsuit against OpenAI,
Mhm.
taking text from YouTube videos and so on, and
Yeah.
the 16,000 artists that try to sue Journey and so on. Do you feel like this is something that might hamper progress? Do you feel it's justified? Do you feel like what's your stance on that?
I think we're still lacking a clear precedent that everyone will follow, right? I think we're all waiting for the App Store lawsuit that sort of governs how this will sort of pan out for the rest of time. Um, but I think right now the approach is just apologize but don't ask for permission. And
Yeah,
I think a lot of people have seen Mira's interview where she was asked about whether they use YouTube data, and it'd be obviously funny if the CTO at OpenAI would not know whether they've used this or not. And
yeah,
I think it hints at a broader problem, which is how do you deal with IP overall? What is allowed? What is not allowed? How do you um, you know pay people out for what's already been done? And it's just so hard to prove one or the other thing, right? And I think it's going to be the golden era, quite frankly, of IP lawyers. I think that's not going to go away. There will be a lot of this. You see the first companies like Reddit striking non-exclusive agreements to at least be
yeah,
paid. I think they're getting 60 million from OpenAI, and I think we'll see a lot more of this. But yeah, I think the next generation of models will probably have a slightly more proactive approach where, um, for one, data quality matters. And so it is actually really advantageous for an open AI to go to Bertelsmann or Axel Springer and to
Yeah.
say, "Hey, can we actually get access to all your textbooks and all your clean data that's already beautifully, revised and curated? And in return, you get money." And in a way, it's also attractive to them because they feel like they're left out, and it's an attractive revenue stream that's maybe non-material for these big AI labs, but equally
Yeah.
beneficial for sort of some of the big media companies or sort of data companies, you could almost say, that are out there. But I think the history is still being written, and again,
As
we're I
we
think
speak, as we speak, it's
as
crazy.
we speak, and I think we're in the earliest of innings, and I think there will be some blockbuster court cases
Um,
to come.
if I was like a young entrepreneur and I would want to start my company,
Yeah.
um, how would I go about AI as a whole? Will I treat that as an opportunity, as a risk? What are the things that I should maybe build my company differently than what I would have maybe a year or 2 years ago in your
Yeah.
book?
Yeah. I think if you're already a founder, I think it's just important to ask yourself is, how is AI changing the game I'm in? And does that allow others to leapfrog to where I'm already at? And at least, you should ask yourself, is there something you can do to make your product experience even more magical and delightful, to find more powerful distribution hacks to improve speed, quality, whatever the core metrics are that that may be able to delight your customers at the end of the day. um, I think overall, AI is going to be part of just about any business, and I think for the majority of businesses, they're not building a foundation model, they're not building a vector database, they're not in the infrastructure layer, right? They're not like what I'd call an AI first company.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's going to be like saying you use a database. No one says they're a database company, like, but everyone uses some sort of a database somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And so in 5, 6, 7 years time, we won't even use the term, "Oh, you're an AI company," because you use some sort of an AI tool or AI foundation model.
Yeah.
Um, but I think at the end of the day, we'll revert back to what's always been true, which it comes down to solving a problem better than anyone else can, and to amazing product and execution talent.
Yeah. That's so insightful, and I think, and I also feel like even on the programmers level, right? So you have Copilot, and now Google launched another one, the Amazon one, and so on. It's going to be endless. I think no programmer will program without these tools, starting from the next few months. And I think
Yeah,
most people already play with that, but still, and I see that also, at Jigsaw, that it's not just about writing the code, it's about how you deal with the architecture and how you deal with the product. And
yeah,
there's a lot of creativity you can still bring to it if you're a good programmer. But it's definitely made an impact on us. So it's definitely something we should. I think also, as I'm thinking about as a founder and also as a CEO, how do
mhm,
I treat the cost base, right? So if I used to think about, oh, I would need 20, 50, 100 programmers to do this and that, now I probably would need less. I think people still don't have the actual numbers
right.
to build that type of model, but it's definitely something that is will influence everybody, which
You're,
is cool. Like I don't think if you're a good programmers, and even if you're a good marketer of a good creative person, like you would want to work faster, better, have more options, and so on.
yeah.
So all in all, with all the threat, and there is obviously a kind of natural threat that everybody feels, I think it's going to be for the good, and people will enjoy that. Um,
And you sort of foreshadow almost a downfall of the VC industry. If no one needs any software engineers anymore, that's what 95% of all funding goes towards. So maybe we'll have these, one or two people $1 billion businesses in five,
yeah.
10 years.
Any more like notes or tips you would want to give to somebody, to companies, to entrepreneurs, to workers?
I, I'd say a few things. So for one, AI is a very empirical science right now. You just gotta try these tools out. You gotta poke them, see what they do, see how they can be helpful to what you're building. I think you got to stay curious. This is an arc that we're just beginning to embark on. If you think it's not going to be relevant, I think it's increasingly going to grow in relevance over time. And I think it's never too late, even if you're not technical, even if you strongly disagree with this shift emerging. I think it's a wave that you're unfortunately part of, whether you choose to or not. And then two, if you lead teams of young people, it's important that you sort of at least speak their language and
Yeah.
share their curiosity. And so I think I just say stay curious, try these things out, see what works. And in a way, it's been more beautiful than ever because everyone can just plug into an API or even download very powerful open source models, and you're given new magic powers that were, to your earlier point, unthinkable a few years ago. And so I think we're in a wonderful day and age where you can
Yeah.
imagine user journeys that like weren't even comprehensible. And I think we'll all be delighted by what's going to be built over the next decade.
All right, Max, thank you so much for your time. It was super insightful and fun. Thanks.
Anytime.